Welcome back. Today we're going over Intro into Inequalities. This is student handout 1 in our guided notes for the inequalities section. An equation uses an equal sign to show that both sides are equivalent. Inequalities. An inequality shows that both sides are not equal. Now in our inequalities we have a greater than symbol, a less than symbol, greater than or equal to, and then less than or equal to, and not equal to. So on there we have these symbols, and each one of these is read from left to right, so that way we can tell if this is a greater than symbol, that means it's always going to be facing that direction, and vice versa for a less than symbol, always be facing that direction. Now in this problem, we want to compare these two numbers and use a statement that is true. So it says there specifically 4 is what compared to 9? Well, 4 is less than 9. And then we have here 0.5 or 5/10 is compared to 45 hundredths or 0.45. That would be greater than. And then -3 is compared to -2. -3 would be less than. Again, reading from left to right, -3 is less than -2. D, we would have -6.1 and -6.10. Those are equal. And E, 12.4 and 12.04. 12.4 is larger than 12.04. Writing a verbal description to represent this inequality statement down below, we have 6 is less than or equal to x, and all we do is write that in words. So we would go ahead and say 6 is less than or equal to x. Go ahead and try the next one on your own. Now that you've tried that one, you would have y is less than 0.5, but we would call 0.5 1/2. Now we're going to use the variable as a starting point when reading inequalities. So we have these problems down below, and we need to determine to whether or not they make the statement true. And so I'm going to go ahead and move this down so we can see a little bit more. But whether the statement is true. So if I have, for number 1, k plus 8 is greater than or equal to 19 if k equals 11. And I want to know, is that a true statement? So I start with a variable. Instead of putting k, I could go ahead and say that k is 11. So I write that out, and I would say, okay, 11 plus 8 is greater than or equal to 19. And if I add 11 and 8, I get 19. Is this a true statement? 19 is greater than or equal to 19. If that is a true statement, then we would go ahead and say true. If it's a false statement, then we would say false. And that's how we do these types of problems. Number 2, I would go ahead and substitute in those values there and test it for whether or not f equals 3, and it looks like I jumped down to over here for number 6. But I would go ahead and test these values and see if they are true based off of that. But coming back to that one, I guess I'll go down to number 6. Testing this one, it's a little bit different. You can see this was just a one-step problem. This one is a two-step problem because we have 6x plus 5 is less than 18. That means 6 times x plus 5. In this case, x is a 5, so that would be a 6 times 5 plus 5. And that would give me 30 plus 5, which is going to be 35. Now, is this a true statement or a false statement? 35 is less than 18. 35 is not less than 18. That is false. So then I would continue on doing the same types of things, but just so that we have some reference, go ahead and try each of these. Make sure you have them written down on there. For these ones, I would go ahead and show that this one, 12 is less than 3, or sorry, 12 is greater than 3, and that is true. The next one, 3 is greater than 3. That's false. 3 is not greater than 3. If there was a line underneath this one and it said greater than or equal to, that would be true, but it is not. Our next one here, we have 13 minus 12 is greater than 30. 13 minus 12 is 1. Is 1 greater than 30? And that is not greater than 30. So we would say that's false. And then I just keep substituting it in. So instead of putting the b here, I'm going to put 22. 16 is less than 22 minus 8. That would be 16 is less than 14. And that is not a true statement. So we would say false. Number 7, I would go ahead and times 2 by 5 because that's what the value of j is, and we would get 10 is less than or equal to 8. And that is definitely false because 10 is not less than or equal to 8. Number 8, we have 5 times 6 minus 3 is greater than or equal to 25, And that would mean that we would have 30 minus 3 is greater than or equal to 25, which would be 27 is greater than or equal to 25. And that is a true statement. Last but not least, we would have 6 times 8 minus 12 from our problem here. And if you worked through this, you would get 48 minus 12, and then you would get 36. And we would test it and see, is 36 less than 40? And if that is true, then we would write true. If it's false, we would write false. All right, next part. So in this problem, we need to know a couple of things before we can figure them out. But first off, inequalities can also be graphed on a number line. And when they're graphed on a number line, we have two types of circles that we use for our starting point. We have an open circle and a closed circle based off of the information. And a closed circle, right here included, means that it can be the number. And that would be our greater than and less than symbols. So we have less than, greater than. For not including it, we call that an open circle. It does not equal that value. Those would be our other two signs. So if it says here x is less than or equal to 5, that one is in our include section or closed circle. So I would go ahead and do a closed circle at 5. And it says here x is less than that. So I would test two numbers here or just find one. So if I go ahead and put 4 here, 4 is less than or equal to 5. That's true, so I know that my arrow is going to go to the left. For numbers 10 through 15, we're going to go ahead and do that very same thing. I go ahead and pick a number here, and it says here k is greater than 11. So I know I'm starting at 11, and then just pick any number on this number line. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and pick 10. Is 10 greater than 11? 10 is not greater than 11, so I know it's going to be an open circle at 11. And since 10 is not greater, that means my arrow cannot go that direction. It must go to the right. On this number 11, is that going to be an open or closed circle? Well, if it has a line underneath it, then that must be a closed circle. So that's going to be a closed circle at 12, and it's going to go to the left because it says here 12 is greater than these numbers. So those numbers have to be smaller than 12 or equal to it. Number 12, D, some number less than 6. That would be an open circle, and it's going to be going to the left because it's smaller than 6. 13. If I have C is less than 25, I do an open circle and it's smaller. 14, it's going to be a closed circle and it's going to be going to the right. Now it seems kind of confusing, but it says here 0 is less than or equal to this number over here, B. So any of these numbers that are bigger than 0 make this true because 0 is smaller than those numbers. So 0 is smaller than 1, 0 is smaller than 2. And so it's kind of backwards to what you would think, but it does work on there. Number 15, we would have x is greater than or equal to 4.5. So halfway between 4 and 5, I'm going to go ahead and do a closed circle. And it says x is greater than, so it has to go to the right. All right, last but not least, we have here on this word problem, we're going to write the verbal expression as an inequality, and then we're going to graph it. So the McDonald family spends no more than $150 for groceries each week. That means I'm going to go ahead and use the McDonald family and the amount of money that they spend each week. We don't know what that number is, so we would say X is compared to 150. Now, is the amount of money that they spend going to be greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to 150 based off of the information up here? Well, if we read and we see the context clue, it says they spend no more than 150. So can they spend more than $150? Well, according to the clues in the problem, it says they don't spend any more than 150. But they could spend 150, so that would mean that this value has to be less than or equal to. Since it's less than or equal to, we know it is a closed circle at 150. Now there's no numbers down here, so we have to choose our interval. I'm going to go ahead and choose to count by tens, I believe. And I go ahead and just pick a number for 150 right here, and I start counting up and down from there. And it's going to be a closed circle, and it says it has to be equal to or smaller, so it's less than. So I go ahead and draw my closed circle to the left. From that information, you should be able to answer number 17. But go ahead and look at this one where it says Jared earns at least $10 per hour when mowing lawns. So we have the $10 that we're going to be comparing to our variable. Our variable compared to 10, and it says there he earns at least $10 an hour. So could he earn $8 an hour according to this statement? And the correct answer there is no, he could not. He'd have to earn at least 10, meaning 10 is his minimum amount that he earns. He earns $10 or more, so we would show that where it would be a greater than or equal to inequality symbol. So that, again, we'd write our numbers down. I'm going to start 10 right here, which means I'm going to have 11, and my other numbers from there, if I count by ones, or if I count by fives, it's going to go ahead in 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. It's a closed circle, and it says these numbers are larger than 10, so I go ahead and show that by putting my closed circle and going to the right. Hope this was helpful for you. Go ahead and make sure you finish this up by writing 2 sentences for what we went through today, a minimum of 2, and then go ahead and get started on your assignment. Have a good one.